first down. They hand off to Marlon Mack. Huge hole, 50-yard line. He's at the 40, still going near sideline. He's at the 10. He's at the 5, and he will score. Touchdown, Marlon Mack. Touchdown, INDY. And again, it's picked up. It's Darius Leonard. Leonard with his second INT, and he's streaking down the near sideline. He's at the 40. He's at the 30. He's at the 20. He's going to go. A pick six for the Maniac.
Horseshoe is back, baby. The horseshoe is back.
Welcome back to another episode of the Bring the Juice podcast. I'm your host, as always, Mr. Cody Felger, joining me alongside Derek Larger. Derek, training camp's coming up, man. It's very, very soon on the horizon. Super cool stuff happening. I know we potentially have some opportunities to be in that. And so I wanted to look here. We haven't done this yet this year. I want us to break down our final 53-man roster for the Colts this year and kind of give our thoughts on each position, because we have had some debate back and forth in previous episodes about, okay, do they keep this amount of players at this position and this amount of players at that position? Well, here it is. This is our prediction for who we think is going to make the Colts' final 53-man roster. So I guess you can start first here, Derek, with the quarterbacks. How many quarterbacks are you keeping, and who are those guys you're keeping for the Colts on their 53-man roster?
Yeah, for me, you have to keep three here, and that would be Phillip Rivers. You have to keep Jacoby Brissett as your backup, and obviously Jacob Eason, your fourth-round quarterback that you selected this year to gain some of those reps. And obviously this would mean the result of Chad Kelly being cut from the 53-man roster, but I feel that this would be ideal for the Colts to have these three quarterbacks to start out the year.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I'm going to keep all three of these guys. Now, I know it might hurt the immediate impact for Jacob Eason, like his development, because ideally he's not going to see the field at all in 2020. But I think, you invested a decent amount of draft capital in him. You got to keep him around. You got to see how he continues to develop. You got to let him learn and soak it in behind these two veteran quarterbacks. So I'm all in there for Jacob Eason staying at the number 3. Obviously, the number 1 and 2 are pretty solidified at this point, and you're paying those guys significant amount of money to be on your roster. So I agree there. And then you would obviously cut Chad Kelly in that instance. Yeah. I don't think that's too much of a shock. There's a few maybe.
Except for the Chad Kelly boomers. That's pretty much it.
Which will be in our comments. But, yeah, we have him getting cut. Sorry, guys. But I think it just makes too much sense. Chad Kelly, you signed him. You didn't invest anything into him. Jacob Eason's a 4th-round pick. So it makes a lot of sense from that front.
Yep.
All right. Now moving on to a little more of a hot topic one, a little more controversial potentially, the running back position. Now, some people have argued 3. Some people have argued 4. Last year, the Colts kept 4. And so for me, I'm going to keep 4 as well. That obviously being Marlon Mack, Jonathan Taylor, Naheem Hines. And then I'm also keeping Jordan Wilkins. I mean, we've, vocally been on this podcast saying how much we love Jordan Wilkins' game and what he brings to the Colts. When he's on the field, that's just been the trouble. He hasn't been on the field a ton. But Jordan Wilkins offers a solid number 4 running back. We saw last year when injuries happen, when they normally do in the NFL, especially at that running back position, that number 4 running back, it really goes from being non-essential to being critical. I mean, we thought Jonathan Williams last year was a number 4 running back, and look what happened. I mean, he was needed a couple games. He ran for 100 yards. Really gave the Colts a boost when they needed it in the running game. And so that's why I'm keeping 4 running backs there. And also from the other standpoint of, Marlon Mack's in his last year of his deal. What if he decides to go elsewhere? Then you could keep Jordan Wilkins. You could, he has another year after Marlon Mack is gone, so you could keep him on the roster. He could be your number 2 behind Jonathan Taylor moving forward, and he'd be a lot cheaper probably if you're thinking about that. So what are your thoughts, Derek, here on the running back position?
Yeah, I'm in the same boat with you. I think that they need to keep 4. The Colts have notoriously kept 4 running backs on the roster because, like you said, Marlon Mack has had some injury history before. That could still be an issue this year. And who knows if Jonathan Taylor is going to stay healthy. I mean, obviously we think that he can, but I mean, there's obviously the implication of that. And Naheem Hines, even though Naheem Hines is the running back, we use him in a bunch of different ways outside of just the run game. He's more of that pass catcher. And that ultimately would put Jordan Wilkins as the solidified number 3 running back if you're using him for that exact purpose of running. So, yeah, I definitely think with Jordan Wilkins' game and what he provides for us off of the bench, we definitely need to keep him on the roster for multiple reasons, like you said. So I'm down to keep 4 running backs this year.
Okay. Then that'll mean there'll be some other cuts at other positions, which we'll get to in a minute. And I don't think there's any notable cuts there from the running back position. I mean, you don't have to cut anybody. Jonathan Williams, you just didn't re-sign. He's going to obviously probably play somewhere else this next year. We have kind of a interesting position because the Colts don't normally have this position on their team. The fullback, Roosevelt Nix. He was brought in the offseason. He's been a Pro Bowl run blocker. And obviously the Colts have decided they want to be a top 5 rushing team in the NFL, and Roosevelt Nix is one of those pieces that helps solidify their commitment to the run. Are you keeping Roosevelt Nix, though? I mean, there's a lot of cuts that are going to be made. Are you going to keep a guy like Roosevelt Nix on your roster?
I would think Ballard wants to keep him on this roster because, it's you brought him in here for that exact reason, right? And, at any time you can decide to leave him in the dust if you want to, because, you didn't give him much in any kind of way when you signed him. I mean, you basically gave him $1 million for a year, but that's ultimately what they wanted to do. They wanted to bring Roosevelt Nix in here to help them establish an even more dominant running attack. So that's what Frank Reich wants to do. It's what Ballard wants to do. So I think they're going to keep him.
Mm-hmm. I'm right there with you. I think they're going to keep him. I kind of envision him, you only really have 3, which we'll get to in a minute, 3 tight ends that, have been on the roster before. So maybe he could kind of serve that Ryan Hewitt role a couple years ago, more of a run blocking tight end / fullback. Maybe he could they can kind of use him wherever they need him to, but he probably won't be catching passes out of the backfield. He'll be more of a strictly run blocker.
He could. There is some options.
Ryan Hewitt caught a touchdown.
Roosevelt Nix has caught a touchdown or 2 here and there in his career. So he has had that option. So, and with Phillip Rivers as your quarterback and what the Colts want to do with their offensive system, anything can happen. You could surprise a couple defenses with that. You honestly could. I think a lot of defenses would get really confused by Roosevelt Nix catching a pass. I think that would probably confuse a lot of people.
Almost as confusing as Anthony Costanzo catching a touchdown pass against the Patriots a few years ago. That was crazy. Okay. Well, we're keeping Roosevelt Nix. We'll move on to the wide receivers. So this is where the number crunch starts here. So you could either get the choice of keeping 5 or 6 wide receivers. I guess I'll go first. I'm going to probably keep 5 just because you kept 4 running backs and you're also keeping Roosevelt Nix. You got to make some cuts here, unfortunately. The reason why I'm keeping 4 running backs and only 5 wide receivers is simply just because, you think about this offseason, right? You really think about, the lack of preseason action for some of these younger guys. Probably some of those guys will be vying for the number 5, number 6 position. They're going to be impacted, I feel like, a lot more negatively in their development as opposed to a guy like Jordan Wilkins who's been in the system a few years. I think that's the argument for why I would, lean towards more running backs than more wide receivers, because what you got in your 4 running backs as opposed to some of those younger wide receivers. You just don't know at this point. So obviously that would be T.Y. Hilton, Michael Pittman, Paris Campbell, Zach Pascal. And then for the number 5, this one's going to be interesting. I think I'm going to go with Marcus Johnson. And that's hard for me because, we just had Reese Fountain on. We love Reese Fountain. We're really rooting for him. We hope he can maybe take that number 5 position. But I just go back to what I just talked about, right? I mean, it's going to be a hard, to get acclimated, obviously, coming off that injury. Marcus Johnson's been in the system a few years. He knows Frank Reich's system, even going back to his Philadelphia days. So for me, I'm going to keep Marcus Johnson as my 5. Derek, what do you think about this wide receiver position? Are you giving 5 or 6? And if so, who are they going to be?
Man, it's really tough because, one of those things that when it comes to, I don't like to take away depth at the defensive position. I always feel that the offensive position is a little more flexible in how you can talk about taking players away if you're going to do it on offense versus defense. And like you said, I would much rather take a spot away from the receivers, because the receivers in the end, you can find a lot more guys that come into the wide receiver role unnoticed, but can still come in and contribute with a quarterback like Phillip Rivers in the system that they want. I don't think you could get a running back off the street just like that and they'll be as dominant on behind this offensive line or what the scheme is versus what the four that they have now that they know are bona fide, really good running backs. And like you said, there's so much uncertainty with the wide receiver position. Who is actually going to step up? Because we don't know. So many of these guys are still so young. So yeah, I'm going to go 5 wide receivers as well, but I'm going to change my number 5. I am going Darius Fountain with that number 5. Okay. Something tells me this kid is going to this guy's going to prove people wrong. Remember when we were talking and he said, he talked to Deion Kane and other guys and they were saying, you guys can compete for that number 2, number 3 spot if you guys keep doing what you're doing. I think Darius is there. I think his mindset's there. His work ethic is there. I feel he just needs to stay healthy and he keeps that going. If he is, I think the Colts take that shot at that number 5 on him. And I mean, if it doesn't work out or if something changes, you can always bring somebody else in. But I just think Darius Fountain is who I'm going to go with for right now.
Okay. See, my thing is just, I love Darius Fountain and like his story and what he was doing last year. But you got to come back and think about he's never really played a meaningful snap. He's admitted that. He's never really played a meaningful snap in the NFL. So for me, I think it makes more sense to have a guy who kind of knows the system already. So that's why I went with more of a safer pick. And also Marcus Johnson's not a bad player. Like he had a few games last year over 100 yards. So
and that's ultimately why I think you could make the argument they are going to go with 6, because you ultimately think you can add a guy like Marcus Johnson who's been in the system, knows how it works, and then you have that 6 spot for Darius Fountain to come in, continue to learn, you get him a few snaps, and then you decide, okay, we're going to bring you up into the depth chart because we like what you've been providing and the limited snaps we've seen from you. I want to see you come in and do more of that. So, I mean, that could also be the argument for the Colts deciding to keep 6. I mean, it's a very interesting question. Honestly, that's one of the more controversial parts here is whether or not they keep 5 or 6. Honestly,
see, even if you keep 5, I feel like you could sneak a Darius Fountain onto the practice squad, still have him. So if injuries happen like they did last year, boom, he gets a shot. He's elevated to the final 53. You can't do that with Marcus Johnson. You can't really do that with Jordan Wilkins. They're probably gonna get claimed by somebody. I don't even think Marcus Johnson really can be put on the practice squad at this point. But I think both those guys are too talented and too well known, I guess. To be able to just kind of be on the practice squad. They're going to get claimed. So I would prefer to keep, those 5, obviously keep Reese around. You don't just outright cut him. You keep him on the practice squad. You let him continue to heal, develop, all those things. And then if an injury happens, you let him elevate to that final 53-man roster for one of those guys. And then you make cuts elsewhere. That's kind of where my argument is. But I definitely see your side of it because I think as a whole, you could probably argue that Reese Fountain maybe has a little more upside, I guess. You kind of know what Marcus Johnson is, where Reese Fountain, you maybe have a little bit more questions. Like he could
big body
excel.
Wide receiver, man.
Right.
Big body wide receiver, the kind of guy that goes up and catches passes. That's a Phillip Rivers kind of receiver for you. I mean,
absolutely,
he really is.
Which is why I don't want to rule him out because I think he has a good shot. All right, we'll move on to the tight ends then. I think this one's pretty clear cut as well for me. I don't really see them keeping any more than 3 tight ends on this roster, especially if you're already keeping Roosevelt Nix, who's more of a run blocker, could potentially, be a tight end / fullback type of guy, line up in different spots. So obviously Jack Doyle, Trey Burton, Mo Alley Cox are my 3. I think this one's pretty set, honestly. I mean, all these guys have been in the system of Frank Reich's offense before. They know what they're getting with this offense. The biggest question mark, I guess, is can Trey Burton stay healthy? Because if he can, I think this is one of the most underrated position groups on this team. I assume Derek are probably on the same page here because this one was not really that controversial. I wouldn't keep a guy like Farrad Green, undrafted free agent, or any of those other guys in favor of these three. I wouldn't do it.
Yeah,
I wouldn't.
that's
You can let those
it.
guys develop. So, okay, awesome. We'll move on to the offensive line. Chris Ballard normally likes to keep 9 or 10 offensive linemen. I'm going to probably project probably 9. That's where I've kind of always been, kind of right in the middle. Obviously, you got Costanzo. I'll just name your 5: Costanzo, Nelson, Kelly, Glowinski, and Smith. You obviously drafted Danny Pinter this last year. You have even Jake Eldrenkamp, who's kind of been getting some hype. He got some hype earlier this offseason. I want to see what Javon Patterson brings. LaRaven Clark obviously is going to be your backup left tackle. So that's 9 right there for me.
9. Also, just something that's interesting. I know that this is not Colts related, but Larry Warford did actually opt out this year.
Okay, so he's not an option anymore.
Yeah, he's not an option for anyone anymore. He was getting multiple offers, but he decided to opt out. So,
yeah, well, yeah. So far, no Colts have opted out. We'll see if that changes, but I don't know. Right now, it's been quiet.
It wouldn't. Yeah, so far it's been fine. I mean, we got so many young guys. I think that's kind of something that you're getting to understand is a lot of these guys who are opting out as of this recently, these 25 people who have so far, a lot of them have had a lot of time in the league. Patrick Chung, Hightower, a few guys like that are, are veterans in this league. They've been in for a while. They know what's up to it. The Colts are so young to this point that the Colts, a lot of these younger guys don't honestly care. They want to go out and play football because they're in the middle of, showing themselves who they are. They don't really have a lot of the freedom or the ability necessarily to just say, I'm going to leave for the season. A couple of these guys are still trying to show who they are in this league. And I mean, they're seeing this, even though there's some risk to it. I mean, they have everything to lose in that.
Right. And even some of the veterans they brought in, they didn't sign them to long-term contracts. They're on one-year deals. So, they have something to prove as well. Xavier Rhodes, TJ Carey, whatever, all those guys, they have something to show. Are there any other guys that you would potentially throw into this mix for the offensive line group? I mean, would you keep 9 or would you go up or would you go below? Or where's your head here?
You can't go anything below 9, to be honest. I know that the Colts have had extraordinary luck when it comes to the injuries. We've had last year, we had Nelson missed half a game at most. Ryan Kelly missed a quarter or two in one of the games. Outside of that, Costanzo never got hurt. Glowinski and Braden Smith never got hurt. And I mean, we got lucky last year. I don't expect that to happen again, but with the sake of being careful, you have to keep at least 9 on here. It would not surprise me if Ballard does decide to want to put another offensive lineman in there, though. Would not surprise me at all.
Yeah, a guy we're not talking about, but Chris Ballard is just they like what they see in training camp from him. He surprises. He's on the final 53. I would not be surprised at all.
Yeah.
All right. Now we've covered the offense. Now let's move to the defense. We'll start with the defensive ends. So for me, I got 4 guys. Obviously, you got Justin Houston. You got your 2 second-round picks, Kamoko Toure, Ben Banogu. So there's 3. And then I'm going to throw Al-Qadim Muhammad, a guy who's vastly underrated by the Colts.
Okay.
I mean, Al-Qadim Muhammad, man, he's a guy that nobody talks about. I really like Al-Qadim Muhammad. Ever since he was picked up by the Colts, he's been solid. He's not been anything spectacular. He's been a rotational piece, but I don't think he gets the credit he deserves. I honestly think he could be kind of one of the dark horse guys to play that other defensive end position alongside of Justin Houston. I really think he has the opportunity to do that. He could, I feel like he's very similar in certain ways to Jabal Sheard. And obviously Sheard being gone now opens up that position for him and maybe probably Ben Banogu to kind of battle that out and see who takes the other defensive end position. Muhammad's been in the system a little bit longer, so he could obviously get, maybe a little bit more of an advantage over Banogu. But it'll be an interesting battle to watch for that other defensive end position.
Yep.
Are there anybody else you would add here to, the strictly defensive end guys?
I was going to say, you said Houston, Toure, Banogu, and Muhammad. I think you got it right here. I think those 4 are the guys that I'm going with. I don't know. I don't think Kendall Coleman necessarily makes it right away, especially with the issue that we're having with roster cuts. That's something that's going to be difficult for him for this next year or two, but that could be something later on down the road. But those four guys right there, I would agree with you 100% on those four defensive ends.
Yeah. And it means you're cutting obviously Coleman and then Gary Green, who was a 6th-round pick last year for you. I think it was last year. Anyway, he was a later round pick for you. All right, defensive tackle. This is where it gets very interesting. Lots of potential here. You got some more established guys, and then you got some guys who are early round picks who have shown flashes, but they haven't put it all together. You've got a guy that you signed a couple of years ago. He showed some flashes, but last year he kind of had a down year. Obviously, DeForest Buckner, Grover Stewart, 1-2. There you go. You got to think Sheldon Day brought in. He's going to be number 3. It'll be interesting to see, do you keep 4, do you keep 5? Because if you keep 5, then you could just keep Danico Autry and keep Tyquan Lewis, who could also play some defensive end for you. I'm more inclined to keep 5, honestly. I think all these guys have potential. They offer you those 2 guys offer you some position flexibility. So if you ever get in a pinch, one of those guys can play more defensive end for you. So that would mean you're keeping all 5 of these guys. Are there anybody else? And that would also mean you're cutting your 6th-round pick, Robert Windsor, in the process. Do you have any thoughts on this, Derek? Any other moves you would make? Would you cut into these guys? Would you keep them all? Where do you think here?
I am actually going to potentially go with a surprise cut here. I'm with you. I'm trying to keep 5 with this group because, like you said, they had the option of bringing Danico Autry to the outside because, he's more of that pass rushing specialist, if you say. And he gives you that option. So you're right. Buckner, Stewart, day 1 and day 2, no question about it. Sheldon Day, Danico Autry. But here's where a surprise cut is for me. Tyquan Lewis does not make this, and Robert Windsor comes in and wins that spot. You
think so?
Yeah. I think I like Robert Windsor. I like his attitude. I think he brings that fire and that competitive nature that just appeals to coaches. He may not be the most mechanically sound and most fundamentally sound guy out there. Tyquan Lewis probably has him beat in that category, but Windsor's never really had any major injury concerns. You can probably rely on him to stay on the field a little longer. And nobody questions Robert Windsor's effort. That kid plays harder than a lot of defensive tackles I see. He's undersized for some people, but his effort makes up for that. So I think Windsor makes this roster. I really do. I have faith in him, to be honest.
Okay. That would be really sad, really unfortunate if Tyquan Lewis is gone, man. It's just been so hard to see him not contribute to this Colts team. 2nd-round talent. He was taken in the 2nd round. He just has not done anything. I'm just going to be interested to see his back is against the wall. Like, this is his final shot.
Yeah, it really is.
Does he put it together?
Yeah. That's that's if he even makes it out of training camp, to be honest.
Right. Exactly. And Chris Ballard even said he had long talks with Quincy Wilson. He's gone. He got shipped out to New York. And also Tyquan Lewis he talked about. So this really is the last shot for Tyquan Lewis. Tyquan, please put it together. You have the talent. We know you do. Yeah. We've seen it. It's time for him to put it together. It's time for, hopefully, that what Chris Ballard said lit a fire under him, and he's challenging. He's pushing for playing time. I really hope that's what happens here with Tyquan Lewis. He hasn't shown it yet, but this is his final shot. If he wants to stay with the Colts, if he wants to earn a 2nd contract, Tyquan Lewis, the time is now. You got to tear it up in training camp or else you're going to be gone. That's just the nature of the game. And I don't want to see that happen. Derek doesn't want to see that happen. As a former Ohio State guy, Derek does not want to see you gone. So don't do it.
Yeah.
All right. Linebackers. All right. I'll just talk about the 3 we know are going to make the roster. Probably I could throw 4 that are probably going to make the roster. Darius Leonard, Anthony Walker, Bobby Okereke, EJ Speed. There's your 4. Now, 5 and 6 are going to be interesting to me. I'm going to keep 6, I think. And these guys I'm going to keep, 5 and 6, I'm going to keep more for special teams. I think out of the 2 linebackers, I don't know. it's tough for me because I'm like debating Zaire Franklin, Matthew Adams. I think that's what I'm going to kind of debating.
Yeah.
I think Matthew Adams is probably the better player, but I think Zaire Franklin offers you a little bit more on special teams. And so for that reason, I'm going to keep Zaire Franklin over Matthew Adams. And then I'm also going to give the number 6 nod to Jordan Glasgow, a later round pick this year, 6th round pick. I think he was a final pick in this year's draft. Fantastic special teams player at Michigan. Fantastic. He's not going to see the field as a linebacker / safety, whatever he actually is. He's going to play more special teams. Chris Ballard was he raved on him, man, like how good he was in college. And we've seen it. You can win and lose games through how good or bad your special teams are.
Yep.
And if they're getting better special teams guys like that, I think that ultimately keeps Jordan Glasgow on this roster. He's the last linebacker, but he has a chance to contribute right away. He's one of those later round picks like Isaiah Rodgers that has a chance to contribute right away on the special teams. And that could be the reason why they make the final 53-man roster, even if they're not contributing on offense or defense. So, I guess I'm cutting Matthew Adams there. What are your thoughts, Derek?
I'm going to agree with you 100% here. I don't think that's the thing about Adams. I don't see a lot of future relevance for him in this spot. I mean, like you said, Zaire Franklin and Glasgow, their efforts and their ability to play special teams, that's what separates them. Puts them on the roster to where they can fill that spot if they need to, but ultimately their ability to play special teams and fill that role. And, I mean, with Glasgow, that's why they drafted him. They drafted him for his special teams ability, and they drafted him because his effort is there. He always makes plays. Just somehow, some way he makes plays. So I think that Glasgow has a good opportunity to make this roster with the way that the Colts really like their special teams guys.
Yeah, I agree. All right, let's move to the corner position. Derek, I'm gonna let you go here for the corner position first. First off, how many guys are you going to keep at the corner position? And then if you keep less guys, who are you going to cut?
I'm probably going to go with 6. That's normally the amount that they would try to go with. Obviously got Rockis in. You got Xavier Rhodes, right? And then obviously Marvell Tell in there. Kenny Moore, I can't forget him. And then I'm trying to think for beyond that. And then obviously TJ Carey, I would think would be that other role piece, right? That's who he is. And then I think you'd have to keep Isaiah Rodgers because I know that, again, he's undersized in a lot of ways, but again, what he provides for special teams and his speed, the speed is just remarkable. I mean, it keeps you in a matchup with any wide receiver. It doesn't matter who it is. Outside of maybe Tyreek Hill, there's no other wide receiver that has the ability to outrun Isaiah Rodgers with his speed. So, ultimately, that's what keeps him in this. He has the special teams ability. And again, if he just continues to work and the Colts really are stretched thin, and Isaiah Rodgers is a ball hawk. Don't forget this guy had, I don't know how many pick sixes he had. I think he had like 3 or 4 in college. But, this guy definitely has a knack for making interceptions. So I like Isaiah Rodgers. I think that he's a creative guy. I think he's fast, and I think he's got the potential to do that. I've seen a lot of videos where he was doing them one-on-ones over this offseason with people, and, he was keeping up with everybody. Even if he lost, like, a little bit of space, if the quarterback didn't time the route perfectly, Isaiah Rodgers is breaking on that route and is making the play. So I think that's the 6 that I'm probably going to keep for the cornerback position.
Yeah. So with this cut, with those 6 added, now you only have 7 spots left. So you got to think the 3 guys for special teams, whoever your kicker is, and we'll talk about that in a second. And then you got to, so that means you got to keep 4 safeties if we're going to round it out like this. Yeah. So out of those 4 safeties, I'm keeping Hooker. I'm keeping Willis. Those are your 2 starters, I think. George Odom, who we've talked about. And then, right away, Julian Blackmon won't be on the active roster because he's going to be injured, right? Mm-hmm. So I think I'll keep Roland Milligan at least at first until Julian Blackmon comes back. Roland Milligan, is more of a special teams guy. He can fill in when needed. But obviously, I think Julian Blackmon, when he comes back, he'll fill that number 3/number 4 safety position. Wherever he lines up and wherever George Odom lines up there at the back. Yeah. So those will be my guys there. Obviously, Blackmon, he's one of those guys that got placed on the PUP list, so he's not going to be back till maybe late October. So he's really going to miss a significant chunk of the season early on. But when he comes back, he's definitely going to make the active 53-man roster. Probably just cut Roland Milligan. He'll fit right in there.
Yep.
So awesome. All right. So that means that leaves the last 3 guys on special teams. All right. Here we go. The biggest question on special teams. Who's going to be your kicker and why?
I feel I'm going to get a lot of crap from the comments section for who I'm about to pick here. But
I know you're going to pick.
It's got to be Chase. It's got to be Chase. I mean, I can't imagine Chase McLaughlin not being the starter right off the bat because, again, I know obviously Hot Rod obviously has the name. He has the look. He has the ability. I'm not saying he doesn't. But I'm just saying right off the bat, because Chase did very well when he came in, was very, very consistent, did what needed. He never missed a extra point, stuff like that. And I know that, it shouldn't matter that much for a young kicker coming straight in. But, I mean, Aguayu for Florida State was the greatest kicker we had ever seen since it was Mike Nugent. Mike Nugent from Ohio State in 2004 was the best kicker on the planet, came in, and he was obviously he was supposed to be the next amazing kicker. He never really was. He got tossed around for a lot of times. Aguayu comes in, next greatest kicker ever. A second rounder spent on this guy, and then a few years into the league, gone. He can't even keep a position now because he couldn't even kick. I mean, it's something just about guys who are proclaimed to be these amazing, amazing kickers. They just never seem to stay around long enough. And I'm not going to say that's him. I'm not going to say that. But I'm just saying right off the bat, get used to getting the reps amongst NFL players. Get used to it. Just be a part of the squad. Get used to kicking in that scenario because it is different than from college. And then when he starts getting comfortable, then I'll say, if Chase starts struggling a little bit, then you have that option. But right now, I just know Chase was there last season, did what needed to be done. He was consistent. He deserves to keep that spot right now.
Yeah. And, we talk all the time about the transition from college to the NFL. We talk about it with everybody except for the special teams guys. And I don't know why we don't really talk about it. But, it's one thing that obviously Blankenship can kind of hold, and people have argued this. He didn't miss an extra point in college at all, which obviously is incredible, but it's different in the NFL. It's further back. There's just little things like that. And, you're not kicking against, freshmen, whatever, from, I don't even know what teams they played last year, but you know what I mean? You're not playing against these tiny little guys. You're playing against grown men out there.
That are used to blocking these kicks of all things.
Yeah.
They're used to it now.
So, it's one thing when you saw, even in Adam Vinatieri's case last year, the Colts, they had the chance to get a new kicker for a while, and Adam Vinatieri was knocking him down in practice, but when it came time to game time, he didn't do it. Mm-hmm. And so, I saw Chase McLaughlin in game time making 50-plus yard field goals, converting his extra points. He's played for a few teams. He's kind of seen the league a little bit. He's only been in the league for 1 year, but I feel like he's a veteran. I feel like he kind of gives you that vibe. So obviously it's hard to go against Hot Rod, but I think I'm going to stay with you, Derek. I really do. I think that Chase McLaughlin right now, especially with the lack of preseason, he has the upper hand here. And I think unless Chase is catastrophically awful, unless, Blankenship, which could happen, is just completely so much better than him. We saw that a couple years ago when the Colts, I can't remember who they signed. It was a punter from the Vikings. His name's escaping me right now. This is right after Pat McAfee retired. The Colts brought him in. Jeff Locke was his name. Jeff Locke. They brought in Jeff Locke. They brought in, Sanchez, and Sanchez beat him out. and the Colts moved forward with him. And obviously Sanchez is now one of the best punters in the league. So if that happens, I'm good with it. I really am.
And I know people always do the oh, well, look at the kicks he was making in on the field. I mean, when he was practicing, he was nailing 60-yarders. I mean, yeah, but you're not realistically going to hit 60-yarders in the NFL. Only a few kickers in the history of the NFL have ever been able to actually nail that kind of length. And especially I know that for some of you, it may be, oh, well, the kicking motion's the same and everything. No, it's not. It's ramped up faster, and you get nervous when you have a 6 foot, 190-pound guy coming off the edge, knowing he's this close. He's this close to kicking that ball and keeping it from going straight. That messes with your psyche a little bit. And for anyone that doesn't understand that, just talk to Pat McAfee. Pat McAfee knows this. He understands that it's a little bit more difficult, and it's this close. Everything has to be perfect. If it's not perfect, it doesn't go where you want it. So, again, nobody's denying Blankenship's ability to kick. Nobody's denying it. He's got the leg. He hits 60-yarders. I get it. I understand it. But it's different in the NFL. It's something that you have to get used to, and there's a lot more pressure on the line for the NFL than I think there is in college. I know that they say, oh, you're in bigger crowds and everything, but I mean, ultimately your job's on the line here much more in the NFL than what it is in college. So, I mean, it's one of those things that, people may think they're up for the challenge, but they ultimately aren't sometimes. And not saying that's Blankenship, but again, you go with the guy who did it last year, the guy that obviously deserves the spot right now. And until he proves he's not better or proves he's not worthy of the position, don't change it.
Right. Why fix something that's not broken? That's kind of my mantra here. Like, I mean, it's really Chase McLaughlin's position to lose at this point. I mean, if he keeps doing what he's doing, I would keep him. You know what you got in him. I mean, he has a decent leg. He's accurate. He's clutch. Like, he's shown those things with the Colts. Yeah. So why wouldn't you keep him? I don't know. I just think that's kind of mad as far as Chase McLaughlin versus Rodrigo Blankenship. You can disagree, and that's fine. But, I think we make a solid point there. You can make some solid points as well if you disagree. We'd love to debate that with you guys. All right, let's move on. Obviously, we got our punter. We got our, long snapper. We got those two guys. We got Rigoberto and Luke. Let's kind of do a little bit different here. Let's also include our primary kick returner and our primary punt returner. So we'll start with our kick returner. You obviously talked about it. I'm going to go with Isaiah Rodgers. And you also threw in Paris Campbell's name a little bit. Do you think those two guys will primarily be the guys that are handling those kicks?
Yeah, that would probably most likely be the option because they're, again, the guys that their acceleration is just incredible. They're not as shifty as Nyheim Hines, but their top speed is just something that Nyheim Hines just can't do. As fast as Nyheim Hines is, Paris Campbell and Isaiah Rodgers just blow him out, which is amazing. So that's what you want. You want the long-legged guys, and Rodgers isn't even long-legged, but just the guys that have strides and they just go. I mean, they just go. They don't stop and react. They just go.
Right, and Isaiah Rodgers primarily returned kicks in college. He wasn't really a punt return guy, more of a kick returner. Yeah. We'll move to the punt returner. You already mentioned his name, Nyheim Hines. Fantastic last year. He took 2 to the house, almost took 3 in the same game.
And was only tackled by the punter.
Right. And he was at the top of the entire NFL in punt returns for touchdowns. So this guy is an electric. He's lightning in a bottle. He's a guy that we thought when he gets the ball in his hands, he has a chance to take it to the house every single time. And we felt like he's been underused on the offensive side. But I always was wondering, why are you having guys like Chester Rogers, who they may be solid, but you got Nyheim Hines. He's a game breaker. Why would you not put him in there? Now, I know he struggled early on in his rookie year to hold on to the football. Obviously, that whole thing happened, and people were actually crazy enough. People were calling for Nyheim Hines to be cut after those few mishaps in the preseason. Obviously,
I was never one of those. I mean, I was like, he should be taken off of the punt return list right now because, again, your first priority is to hold on to the dang ball. I mean, that's the first priority of a punt returner is to catch the ball first. And if you can't do that consistently, then obviously you don't deserve it. But just for people who are wanting some perspective on how amazing Nyheim Hines can actually be, Nyheim Hines was rated the third best punt returner in all of the NFL last season. Third. The only difference between him and the other two that were ahead of him, Nyheim Hines had only 1/4 of the punt returns that those two other guys actually had. And Nyheim Hines actually had more touchdowns than both of them. Wow. So remind you, Nyheim Hines in 1/4 of the time, 1/4 of the chances has done more than those other guys in touchdowns. So Nyheim Hines, if he gets a full season of having that position and knowing what to do, this kid could get half a dozen touchdowns. It is realistic because in one game he had two. In one game he had two, almost three. I could easily imagine this kid having 6 in a season if he continues to do what he's doing.
Yeah. Just put on his hands and let him go to work. I'm down with that.
Yep.
All right. Well, that'll wrap up our look at the Colts 53-man roster. I'd love for you guys to kind of think, where would I make changes? Because you might make some different changes from us. That's okay. Let us know in the comments. We know what positions would you change from what we've brought. Obviously, give us your thoughts on the kicking. Who you think is going to be kicking for the Colts in Week 1. We'd love to hear that. If you're still watching this video and you haven't yet, be sure to give us a like. Be sure to subscribe to us if you haven't. Be sure to check out all the other content that we have. We've interviewed some Colts players recently, so be sure to check that out. Derek, our sponsors as well, Fan to Fan Network. Be sure to check them out. Also, be sure to check out Roster Guy for all your unique sports needs and perspectives. Be sure to check out rosterguy.com. For Derek and myself, thank you guys so much for all your support. We really appreciate it. Training camp's coming soon. We're super excited for that. And as always, go Colts.